There is a number buried in the history of the internet. A number so large it's almost meaningless. 3 billion. Not 3 million, 3 billion. It represents every single user account a company had ever gathered. Every person who ever signed up. Every forgotten password. Every old email address from a decade ago. And in one catastrophic failure, that company lost all of it. Every last one. The truly terrifying part? For 3 years, they had absolutely no idea. This isn't just the story of a data breach. This is the story of the day the entire internet learned that nothing is truly safe. Before it became a cautionary tale, Yahoo was a titan. For millions of people, Yahoo was the internet. It was your first email address, your homepage, your portal to the digital world. In the late 90s and early 2000s, its purple logo was as iconic as any brand on earth. They were a giant, a foundational pillar of the web. Which is what made the news on September 22nd, 2016, so earth-shattering. On that day, Yahoo dropped a bombshell. They announced they had been the victim of a massive data breach. The number they quoted was staggering. 500 million user accounts. To put that in perspective, at the time, it was the single largest data breach in history. The scale was almost incomprehensible. News outlets went into a frenzy. Security experts were floored. 500 million people had their names, email addresses, phone numbers, and scrambled passwords stolen by what Yahoo described as a state-sponsored actor. This was a disaster of epic proportions. To understand the full catastrophe, we have to look at the two separate but connected disasters that befell Yahoo. Let's start with the one they told us about first, the small one. The 500 million account breach that happened in late 2014. This wasn't a clumsy smash and grab. This was a sophisticated, targeted intelligence operation. It all started, as so many of these stories do, with a single click. The hackers used a technique called spear phishing. This isn't your average spam email asking for money from a Nigerian prince. Spear phishing is custom made. It's an email designed to look completely legitimate, sent to a specific, well-researched target. In this case, the targets were Yahoo employees. Someone, somewhere inside Yahoo, received an email that looked so convincing, they clicked a malicious link, and in that moment, the door was opened. Once inside Yahoo's corporate network, the hackers moved like ghosts. They weren't just random criminals. The US government would later indict 4 individuals, 2 of whom were officers in Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB, the successor to the KGB. This was cyber espionage. Their goal wasn't just to cause chaos, it was to steal the crown jewels, Yahoo's user database. The UDB contained the personal information of hundreds of millions of people. But getting the database was only half the battle. The real genius of their attack was in how they planned to use that information. They didn't just want a static list of names and passwords. They wanted live, ongoing access to people's accounts. To do this, they used a mind-bendingly clever technique involving something called think of a cookie like a digital ticket stub. When you log into a website, the server gives your browser a cookie, so it doesn't have to ask for your password on every single page you visit. It's your proof that you're already authenticated. What these hackers did was figure out the code Yahoo used to create these cookies. With that code, they could forge their own. They could create a golden ticket for any account they wanted, allowing them to waltz right into someone's email, their contacts, their private messages, all without ever needing their password. The user would never get a wrong password alert. They would never be prompted to reset anything. From the outside, it was completely invisible. For 2 years, from late 2014 to the announcement in 2016, these state-sponsored hackers had the keys to the kingdom. They could access the accounts of journalists, dissidents, government officials, and regular people, spying on them in real time. Yahoo's security team eventually discovered the intrusion, but the damage was done. 500 million people were exposed. It was a security failure on a scale never seen before. But while Yahoo's executives were reeling from this discovery, trying to manage the fallout and negotiate the sale of their company to Verizon, a much darker secret was still buried. A secret from the year before, from 2013. A breach that was 1,000 times worse, and one that they still knew nothing about. Let's rewind the clock. The year is 2013. Yahoo is still a major player, and its user base has swelled over 2 decades to an almost unbelievable number. The company held the data for 3 billion accounts. That number is worth repeating. 3 billion. It represented every single person who had ever signed up for a Yahoo service, from email to Flickr to Tumblr. Active accounts, sure, but also the ones you forgot about. The embarrassing email address you made in high school with a bunch of numbers in it. The account you used once to play fantasy football in 2007. If you had ever touched the Yahoo ecosystem, you were in their database. And in August of 2013, a different group of hackers stole all single account. This wasn't a sophisticated cookie forging operation. This was a brute force heist. The hackers managed to get their hands on a backup copy of Yahoo's entire user database. 3 billion entries. And what was in that database? The usual suspects: names, email addresses, telephone numbers, dates of birth, but also 2 other far more critical pieces of information: your hashed password and your security questions and answers. Let's break that down, because this is where the true danger lies. A hashed password isn't your actual password in plain text. It's a scrambled, encrypted version of it. The idea is that even if a hacker steals the hash, they can't immediately read your password. They have to use powerful computers to crack it, trying billions of combinations until they find a match. But here's the problem. Yahoo in 2013 was using a notoriously weak and outdated hashing algorithm called MD5. For a well-funded attacker, cracking MD5 hashes is trivial. It's like locking your front door with a padlock from a child's diary. So, they had a weak lock on the password. But what about the security questions? This is, without a doubt, one of the most shocking failures in the history of cybersecurity. For a huge number of those 3 billion accounts, the security questions and their answers were stored unencrypted, in plain text. Think about that. What is your mother's maiden name? What city were you born in? The very questions designed to be your last line of defense, your way of proving your identity if you forgot your password, were just sitting there in a file, completely readable. For the hackers, this was a gold mine. They didn't even need to crack the password hash. They could just go to the login page, click Forgot Password, and type in the answers they had just stolen. It gave them a direct path to take over an account. For 3 years, this data was floating around on the dark web, an almost complete census of a huge portion of the internet's population, complete with the keys to their digital lives. It was being bought, sold, and traded by criminals and intelligence agencies. And the victims? All 3 billion of them? They had no idea. Yahoo had no idea. The company was flying blind while its users were being systematically exposed. So if Yahoo didn't know, how did this colossal breach finally come to light? The answer is almost as embarrassing as the breach itself. They didn't discover it through their own multi-million-dollar security systems. They weren't alerted by a vigilant employee. They found out because someone who had bought the stolen data started trying to sell it, and security researchers noticed. In late 2016, while the world was still processing the 500 million account breach, law enforcement contacted Yahoo with a sample of data they'd obtained from a source. They told them, "We think this is yours." When Yahoo's security team analyzed the data, a wave of horror must have washed over them. It was their data, but it didn't match the 2014 breach. The timestamps were wrong, the method was different. It was from an entirely separate, previously unknown incident, and the scale was immense. This discovery couldn't have come at a worse time. In mid-2016, Yahoo was in the final stages of being acquired by Verizon for nearly $5 billion. It was a lifeline for the struggling tech giant. Now they were faced with a terrible choice. They had just disclosed a record-breaking breach of 500 million accounts. How do you possibly go back to your buyer, to the public, to your users, and say, "Actually, we have some more news. We found another much older breach, and this one is twice as big"? So, in December 2016, 3 months after the first announcement, Yahoo put out a second press release. They admitted to another breach, this one from 2013, affecting what they believed to be more than 1 billion user accounts. The record for the largest data breach in history, which Yahoo themselves had set just 3 months prior, was now shattered by Yahoo themselves. The internet community was stunned. How could a company lose 1 billion records and not know for over 3 years? It seemed impossible. But the story still wasn't over. The number kept growing. As Verizon's own forensic teams dug deeper, combing through the wreckage of Yahoo's security infrastructure after the acquisition was complete, they finally uncovered the true, horrifying scope of the 2013 attack. It wasn't 1 billion. It wasn't even 2. It was 3 billion. Every single account that had ever existed on their platform. In October of 2017, nearly a year after the first partial admission, the company, now under Verizon's ownership, issued a final quiet update. The 1 billion figure was wrong. The real number was 3 billion. It was total, absolute compromise. The fallout was biblical. The carefully negotiated sale to Verizon was immediately thrown into jeopardy. In the end, the deal went through, but Verizon slashed the price by $350 million. It was a direct financial penalty for the security failures, but that was just the beginning. A cascade of lawsuits followed, filed by outraged users and shareholders. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, came down hard on Yahoo, not just for the breach itself, but for the cover. This is a crucial point. The SEC investigation revealed that Yahoo's senior management and legal teams knew about the 2014 breach almost immediately. They knew that hundreds of millions of users were at risk, but they failed to properly investigate it, and they certainly didn't disclose it to the public or to their investors for 2 years. They were trying to sell the company, and a 500 million user data breach is not something you put in the sales brochure. The SEC fined them $35 million for this deception, marking one of the first major penalties for failing to disclose a cybersecurity incident. All told, between the reduced sale price, the SEC fine, and a massive $117.5 million settlement for a class action lawsuit brought by users, the direct financial cost of the breach ran into the hundreds of millions, but the real cost can be measured in dollars. It was the complete and utter obliteration of trust. Yahoo, once a pioneer of the internet, became a punchline. Its name became synonymous with corporate incompetence and security failure. For the 3 billion users, the consequences were very real. The stolen data fueled years of criminal activity. Think about it. With your name, email, phone number, and date of birth, a criminal has the starting kit for identity theft. With your security questions, they could potentially break into your other accounts across the web. People who reused their Yahoo password on their banking site or their Amazon account were suddenly vulnerable everywhere. The breach created a tidal wave of risk that washed over the entire internet, and it all originated from one company's catastrophic inability to protect its users' data. The internal post-mortem painted a grim picture. Yahoo's security team was reportedly underfunded and at odds with a corporate culture, led by then CEO Marissa Mayer, that prioritized product development and user experience over the unglamorous work of digital security. Warnings were allegedly ignored. Red flags were missed. The company responsible for the private information of a significant portion of the planet's population treated its security like an afterthought, and the world paid the price. So what is the legacy of this colossal failure? What did we learn from the day 3 billion people had their digital lives stolen? First, it fundamentally changed the conversation around breach disclosure. Yahoo's multi-year delay was seen as a profound betrayal. In response, governments around the world enacted stricter regulations. Europe's GDPR, for example, now mandates that companies report significant data breaches within 72 hours. The Yahoo disaster is the reason those laws exist. The era of sweeping security failures under the rug for years was over. Second, it was the final nail in the coffin for outdated security practices. The use of the weak MD5 hashing algorithm was exposed as unforgivably negligent. The storing of security questions in plain text was held up as a textbook example of what not to do. The industry as a whole was forced to move towards stronger encryption, like bcrypt, and to recognize that security questions are not a secure method of authentication. This breach single-handedly accelerated the adoption of two-factor authentication, or 2FA, as the new standard. The idea that a simple password, or your mother's maiden name, is enough to protect you was proven to be a dangerous fantasy. Third, it brought the reality of state-sponsored hacking into the mainstream. The 2014 breach wasn't just crime, it was geopolitics. It showed how nation-states are actively using cyber warfare to gather intelligence, target individuals, and exert influence. It made it clear that the front lines of international conflict are no longer just on the battlefield. They're inside corporate networks and email servers. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Yahoo breach is a more personal one. It was a wake-up call for all of us. It forced us to confront a difficult truth about the digital world we've built. The data we share, the accounts we create, the pieces of our lives we entrust to these massive corporations. It can all be gone in an instant. And the companies we trust to protect it might not even know it's missing. This isn't just a story about a failed tech giant from a decade ago. It's a story about the fundamental fragility of our digital identities. The Yahoo breach serves as a permanent, glaring reminder that in the 21st century, cybersecurity isn't someone else's problem. It's everyone's. The best security systems in the world can't protect you if you reuse the same simple password everywhere. That's why using a unique, strong password for every single account you have isn't just good advice. It's essential. It's why using a password manager to keep track of them all is one of the smartest things you can do. And it's why enabling two-factor authentication on every account that offers it is no longer optional. It's your digital seatbelt. The Yahoo data breach wasn't just a hack. It was a paradigm shift. It was a moment of reckoning that exposed the precarious nature of digital trust on a scale that we had never imagined possible. It proved that the data we give away can be lost forever. And sometimes, the very people we trust to protect it are the last to know it's gone. If you found this deep dive into the biggest data breach in history fascinating, and you want to understand more about the hidden forces shaping our digital world, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Did you have one of those 3 billion Yahoo accounts? How did this story change the way you think about your online security? Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching.